Hey everybody, Mr. Kuespert here to talk today about the
Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union between the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts Bay, Rhode Island, and Providence Plantations, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
shortened down to Articles of Confederation, or the Articles. Now, in order for the Articles of Confederation to actually become the law of the land, all 13 states had to approve. Well, it took a while, but 12 of the 13 states finally approved, Maryland being the only state to hold out at this point. And Maryland basically said, there's no way, basically, we are going to sign off on this until the western lands are dealt with. Looking at this picture here, you can see this map, you can see all the different claims that have been made on those western lands by several states. You've got New York, you've got South Carolina, you've got Virginia, you've got Pennsylvania. All these states, Connecticut, they've all claimed several different areas, and some of them overlap into other claims. Sometimes you've got areas that have been claimed by 2 or 3 or 4 different states, and it's become a real mess. And Maryland really was left out of the western land game. So they said, we have no intention on signing this as the law of the land until the western lands are dealt with. Well, as cooler heads prevailed and people sat down and discussed it, they decided the best bet would be to turn the western lands over to the government, and that the government would then take and break the land up into small bits and pieces and sell them parts at a time until they got enough population out in the western lands in which at that time they could create brand new states. So instead of the 13 states continually growing further westerly and just having 13 giant, really long, narrow states, they decided, let's create a 14th and a 15th and a 16th and a 17th and as many states as they needed to fill out those lands. But the first order of business is simply getting the land settled, and that's where the Land Ordinance of 1785 came in. Besides settling the western lands, the secondary reason for setting up the Land Ordinance is for creating money for the government. Remember, the government had no power to tax, and therefore, in order to pay for things like the Army, the Navy, the Postal Service, things like that, they had to raise some kind of revenue. So by selling western lands, it helped them to at least gain some money for now. Obviously, you can't sell land forever because you're limited on how much land you have, but at least for the time being, it helps to solve the short-term problem of funding those things. But you also know, too, as a government, you can't just sell to individual people. It would take forever for you to work on trying to sell this land to individual farmers, thousands and thousands and thousands of farmers. It would take time. It would certainly take away from your ability to make money and get that money in your hands quickly. So the government set up a system to sell the land, and what they did was they started with eastern Ohio along the Ohio River. As you can see here on the left side of the screen, they were going to take that land and they were going to divide it first into things called townships, which were 6 miles by 6 miles square, a total of 36 square miles. And then they were going to break it up even further into sections, which were 1 mile by 1 mile. That equates to, obviously, 1 square mile or 640 acres. The bidding for these sections would start at no less than $1 per acre. So if it was a really good piece of land, it might go for $3 or $4 or $5 an acre. If it wasn't so great, at the very least, the government was going to get their $1 per acre, or $640 for that one particular section. So these land speculators would step in. They were kind of like real estate agents, and they were middlemen between buying from the government and selling to the farmers. So they would take this, they would go to these land auctions in New York City and Baltimore and Philadelphia with no intention on personally ever going and seeing the land or living there. They were going to basically buy this land and turn right around as fast as they could and sell it to the farmers. Now, you can't sell 640 acres straight up to a farmer because farmers at that time, first off, they don't have that kind of money, and second off, they don't have the kind of equipment that it takes to manage 640 acres. So what these land speculators would then do is, after they would buy the acreage, they would break it down into smaller tracts of land. Usually around 40 acres was pretty manageable. So out of a 640 acre plot, out of one section, you could break it up into 16 tracts of 40 acres apiece. So let's say you started with your auction as a land speculator. You bought it from the government. Let's say after the auction was all said and done, you got it for $1,000. So you have one section for $1,000. Now let's turn around and sell that land to farmers. Those farmers will turn around then and buy, let's say, 40-acre tracts, one at a time. Individual farmers will buy that land, and let's say you sell each tract to a farmer at $500 a piece. Now, we know farmers don't have $500, but what they can do is they can go to banks and they can get loans, and they'll pay the loans over time, 10 or 15 or 20 years, maybe $50 a year, $20 a year until they pay it off. So the banks will lend them the money. The farmers would then buy their 40 acres of land, and if that land speculator was able to sell all 16 tracts, that land speculator would make $8,000 or a $7,000 profit. Now, there's a lot of businesses that you can be involved in today where you can make $7,000 profit on a $1,000 investment. Most of them are illegal. But when it comes to land speculation back then, you could make a lot of money. And if you were a smart land speculator, you would start by buying one section, sell it, get a huge profit, then buy several more sections, sell those, turn right around, make another huge profit, and keep going until you were very wealthy. Some of the first millionaires in America got this way from the Land Ordinance. Now, if you are a farmer, was it a win? Yes, because you got land. If you lived out east and you were crowded with your neighbors, now you could move out west and kind of stretch your arms a bit and have your own plot and say, this is mine, and you felt like you were confident and independent and you could do your own thing. If you were a land speculator, was it a win? Of course it was, because land speculators were making a lot of money on this. If you were the banks, was it a win for you? Yes, it was as well, because those banks would lend money out and they would be paid back a little bit over time, but by the time that loan had finally been finished paying off, they would have made a lot of profit. And if you were the federal government, was it a win? Yes, it was, because the federal government was then able to turn around and use that money from the sale to pay for things, again, like the Army, the Navy, the Postal Service, etc. So it turned out to be a win-win-win-win proposition for everybody involved. Well, that's the Land Ordinance, and I'm out. Have a great day.